It seems like everywhere you turn, there's another article or news story about screen time.
Yeah.
Is it good for us? Is it bad for us? Is it like rewiring our kids' brains? Well, a lot of you have sent us stuff about screen dependency disorder, so we're going to do a deep dive on that today.
It's definitely something people are thinking about.
It's a hot topic, for sure.
Yeah.
The article we're looking at today is an excerpt called Screen Dependency Disorder, Effects of Screen Addiction.
Mm.
And I have to say, it's not from like a super scientific journal or anything, but it brings up some interesting stuff. It almost makes it sound like too much screen time is kind of like
Yeah.
an addiction.
Well, and that's not as crazy as it sounds, right?
Oh.
I mean, we talk about internet addiction, gaming disorder.
Mm-hmm.
People even say Facebook addiction.
Yeah, yeah.
So the words we use might change, but I think the main issue is still the same. When you're using screens so much that it's causing problems in your life.
And this article does not hold back on those problems, let me tell you.
Oh, no.
It lists all these symptoms, like you're always thinking about screens.
Right.
You get antsy when you can't be online. I mean, we've all been there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But then it gets even more intense. It talks about neglecting your hobbies, like even lying about how much time you're spending online.
Yeah, and that's what makes this whole addiction comparison so interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, whether it's a drug or a behavior, a lot of times addiction is about chasing that dopamine rush, that good feeling you get.
Okay.
And screens, they're designed to trigger that same response, especially with all the notifications and the endless scrolling and all that.
It's like they're designed to keep you hooked.
Exactly.
And you can see how that would be even more intense for, like, kids, right? Because their brains are still developing. And the article really emphasizes that point, how vulnerable kids are.
Oh, absolutely. Think of it like this. Imagine a house being built, right?
Okay.
The foundation has to be strong.
Right.
And for a developing brain, those early years, they're like building that foundation.
So important.
Exactly. But too much screen time, it's kind of like trying to build on shaky ground.
Yeah.
And the part of the brain that's most affected, that's still maturing, is the frontal lobe.
Okay, remind me what the frontal lobe is in charge of again.
So the frontal lobe, that's like your brain's command center,
Mm-hmm.
right? It does your planning, your decision-making,
Right.
helps you control your impulses, all the important stuff.
Okay, got it.
And it's also super important for developing your social skills and your emotions.
So if a kid's glued to a screen all the time, are they missing out on chances to, like, strengthen that part of their brain?
Exactly. It's like any muscle,
Yeah.
right? If you don't use it, you lose it. And those real-life interactions, even when they're messy, even when they're boring,
Yeah.
those are actually crucial for building those skills.
It's like they're learning how to be a person in the world.
Exactly.
And speaking of real-world stuff, the article talks to this therapist, Dr. Lin,
Okay.
and get this. He says that 80% of the issues he sees in his patients,
Wow.
80%, he says, are connected in some way to too much screen time.
80%, that's huge.
I know, right? That's not just a few random cases.
No, that's like almost everybody.
And it's not just kids either.
Really?
He says he sees it in people of all ages.
Wow.
Like this reliance on screens, on being digitally connected all the time, it's affecting people's relationships, their jobs, their mental health.
It's like this whole other layer of stress in our lives.
Exactly. And it's not just, in our heads either.
Right.
The article also talks about how too much screen time can cause physical problems too, like trouble sleeping, headaches.
Yeah.
Even your weight can fluctuate. It's like our bodies are trying to tell us something's wrong.
That's so interesting, right? Because we always separate mental health and physical health, but they're totally connected.
They're totally connected.
And sleep is a perfect example.
Oh, yeah.
We know staring at screens before bed messes up our sleep. And bad sleep, that impacts everything. Your mood, your energy, your focus, even your immune system.
It's like this domino effect.
Yeah.
One thing affects everything else.
Exactly.
So we've talked about the mental side, the physical side.
Right.
But what about the social side of things?
Yeah.
Because the article talks about how too much screen time can make people isolated, but how does that actually work?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
We call it social media, but are we really connecting with people in a meaningful way through our phones?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we just like
Right.
racking up likes and followers while feeling more and more alone?
It's like we're more connected than ever, but also more lonely than ever. How does that even make sense?
I think part of it goes back to that reward system in our brains.
Yeah.
Like we get these little hits of dopamine from notifications, from getting likes, from feeling like we're part of everything that's going on. But those little bursts of pleasure,
Mm.
they often come at the expense of those deeper connections,
Yeah.
the ones that really matter.
It's like we're choosing quantity over quality.
Exactly.
Like we might have hundreds of friends online,
Right.
but how many of those people could you actually rely on if you really needed help?
That's a good question. And it's not even just about the number of people it's about what those relationships are like.
Right.
When we have face-to-face interactions, even when they're awkward or unpredictable,
Yeah.
we learn how to empathize with people, we pick up on social cues, we build resilience, and those are things that are really hard to learn through a screen.
It's like the difference between like watching a cooking show and actually getting in the kitchen and trying to make the recipe yourself.
Exactly.
You can learn about something in theory,
Yeah.
but it's not the same as actually experiencing it firsthand.
And speaking of firsthand experience,
Yeah.
the article mentions this really interesting observation from a psychologist, Dr. Sigmund. He calls screens the electronic pacifier of our time.
Oh, wow.
Think about it.
Okay.
Feeling awkward at a party. Phone.
Mm-hmm.
Bored. Waiting in line at the store. Phone.
Oh my gosh, it's so true.
It's like we instinctively reach for our phones in those in-between moments.
Totally.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's never a time or place for that.
Right.
But when we're constantly relying on our screens to avoid boredom or discomfort, it can actually keep us from being present in our own lives.
Yeah.
Like we're always looking for an escape instead of engaging with the world around us.
And in a way, aren't we escaping from ourselves too?
That's a good point.
Because I know, like, when I'm just mindlessly scrolling, a lot of times I'm actually avoiding dealing with my own thoughts and feelings. It's like this weird form of procrastination.
You're totally right. Those moments when we're bored or uncomfortable, as hard as they can be to sit with sometimes,
Right.
they're actually super valuable for our mental and emotional health.
Really?
There's even research on this. When we let our minds wander, when we daydream, when we just allow ourselves to be, our brains tap into something called the default mode network.
Okay, now you've lost me. Default mode network, what is that?
So think of it like your brain's idle mode. It's what's happening when you're not actively focused on a specific task.
Got it.
And it might seem like your brain is just chilling out, being unproductive. But it's actually during this time that our brains make connections, come up with new ideas, process our emotions.
Interesting.
It's like our brains need that downtime to recharge and make sense of everything.
So are you saying that when we're constantly bombarding our brains with stimulation from our screens, we're basically robbing ourselves of those mental breaks?
Exactly. And over time,
Yeah.
that can really affect our attention spans, our creativity, even our ability to regulate our emotions.
Wow.
It's like running a marathon without ever stopping to rest,
Yeah.
Eventually, you're going to crash.
Okay, this is all making a lot of sense now. So we've talked about how addictive screens can be, the impact on kids' brains, the physical effects, the social consequences.
Right.
It's a lot. So what do we do about it? Like the article mentions setting boundaries, but how do you actually do that?
It's tough. Right.
Yeah.
Especially in a world where everyone's expected to be online all the time.
Exactly.
I think it starts with just being aware, like recognizing that this is a real issue,
Yeah.
that we might have picked up some unhealthy habits.
Right.
That's the first step. And then it's about taking small steps towards making a change.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, it could be something as simple as putting your phone on airplane mode for an hour every day,
Okay.
or maybe having certain areas in your home, like the dinner table,
Right.
where screens are off limits.
Right.
It's about making those rules,
Mhm.
and then, this is the important part, actually sticking to them.
See, that's the hard part for me. I can set all these great intentions to cut back on my screen time,
Yeah.
but then, the FOMO kicks in, the fear of missing out,
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
and I'm right back to scrolling.
FOMO is real.
Yeah.
We all feel it sometimes.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. What are we really missing out on? Are those notifications, those updates,
Right.
are they really adding value to our lives?
That's a good question.
Or are they just distractions that are keeping us from being present in the moment?
I mean, that's really what it comes down to, right? Like, are we really missing out on something?
Yeah.
Or are we just, like, scared of that quiet time, that, potential for being bored?
It's funny how much we try to avoid boredom these days.
Right. And maybe if we weren't so afraid of it, we could actually see those unplugged moments as, like, opportunities.
Exactly.
Opportunities to think, to connect with ourselves, to just be present.
I love that.
But it's easier said than done, am I right?
Oh, for sure. It's hard.
It's like, I get it, but we can't just like throw away our phones and go live in the woods.
Right.
So how do we find that balance, between engaging with technology and not letting it take over our whole lives?
I think it comes down to making conscious choices.
Okay.
And those choices are going to be different for everyone. There's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
But maybe it starts with those small steps. Like, what if you set time limits for certain apps?
Yeah.
Or you only check your email at certain times instead of having it constantly pinging you.
Oh, that's a good one. I've actually been trying to do that, set those boundaries and like actually stick to them.
How's it going?
It's amazing, honestly. Like when you're not constantly reacting to every notification, it frees up so much mental space. It's crazy.
That's so great to hear. It really is about taking back control of your attention.
Totally.
And that takes practice, especially in a world that's designed to distract us.
It really is. One thing that's sticking with me from all this is like this idea of a digital diet.
Oh, I like that.
Like we pay attention to what we eat. Right. So why not pay attention to what we're taking in digitally?
Absolutely.
Like, are we scrolling through social media and ending up feeling jealous and insecure? Or are we looking for things that inspire us, things that make us happy, things that teach us something new?
Those are great questions to ask yourself. It's about being mindful of what you're consuming, just like with food.
Exactly. It's not about like depriving yourself or being super strict.
Right.
It's just about making choices that are good for you.
I love that. It's about being intentional with your technology. Are you using it or is it using you?
Whoa. Okay, that is deep.
Right?
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening.
That's a big topic.
It really is. We've talked about so much, like the science behind all of this, actual strategies for having a healthier relationship with our phones.
Yeah.
So for someone listening who might be feeling a little overwhelmed, what's like the one thing you hope they take away from this?
I would say just remember, it's never too late to start making changes. Start small, be kind to yourself, and always remember, technology should be there to make our lives better, not the other way around.
So well said. And to everyone listening, keep thinking about these things. What does your digital diet look like? What little changes can you make starting today to have a healthier relationship with technology? This isn't about getting rid of screens altogether. It's about taking back our time, our focus, and our lives. Until next time, stay curious, and we'll see you on the flip side.